Snell Library, the heart of Northeastern's academic life, holds 985,000 volumes and welcomes over 1 million visitors a year. Through award-winning reference, instruction, meet the author talks, and innovative technologies, the university libraries play an integral role in the intellectual life of the campus. The Snell Library is named after George Snell, class of 41, and his wife Lorraine for their philanthropic leadership and dedication in building a new library for the NU community.
Are you familiar with this device?
I'm pretty familiar. I don't have one myself, but I know it's like a reading device where you download ebooks.
I don't own one, but my roommate does.
I know that Oprah is a big fan of this device.
I've seen something like it before. I've never used one, and I wouldn't know how to.
What do you think about that kind of technology?
I think it's inevitable. I have heard a lot about this.
Are you familiar with this device?
No.
Not at all.
What do you think about reading a book or looking at your textbook on a device like that?
To be absolutely honest, I prefer something like physical, more of the traditional text.
I'm more old-fashioned, and I do love the feel of a paperback book.
I like books. I like to look at the covers. I like to read the pages. I think I would rather read a proper book than read it on a machine.
It looks good. I like that there's no backlight. I feel like it wouldn't hurt my eyes if I was using it, but I still feel like I'd prefer paper.
The connection you form with a book, I don't think you'll be able to form the same connection with this.
Would you ever consider having that instead of all your paperback?
Sure. I mean, this is a lot easier to carry around.
That would definitely save my back a lot of hurt and pain.
Yeah, it's certainly easier. I mean, it's all kind of like the iPod. I mean, it's all in one place.
Let me see. Would I get it for $300?
If I got it as a Christmas gift or birthday gift, then yes, but I would not personally drop the $300-400 to get one myself.
Maybe after tax season I would get it.
If, for instance, the university were to provide all students with one and then we could have digital textbooks, that would be awesome.
Technology takes over, I guess pretty much everyone wants stuff that's more convenient for them, so I'm guessing that this will become popular within the few years.
I definitely see a time in which there's a universal device that we do everything with that would be as portable as this, and books would definitely be a part of that.
As a print designer, though, it's kind of a scary thought to see printed material disappear entirely. So.
Good afternoon and welcome to NUcast, Northeastern University's live web series. NUcast brings together university faculty and experts to debate the different sides of intriguing topics that affect our university and the community at large. I'm your host, Tawna Rathe, and on this episode of NUcast, we'll discuss the future of reading. So many books are available electronically, and with the development of reading devices like the Kindle, there has been a dramatic shift affecting how people experience the act of reading. Today's panelists include Will Wakeling, Dean of University Libraries at Northeastern. Will has been at Northeastern since 1998, is actively involved in expanding the digital collections at Snell Library. Will, thanks for joining us today.
Welcome to Snell Library.
Thank you. Mary Loeffelholz, who is the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and a Professor of English at Northeastern, is the author of 3 scholarly books. Mary earned a PhD from Yale University and has been a member of Northeastern's faculty since 1988. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Our third panelist is Eve Bridburg, a literary agent with Zachary Shuster Harmsworth. Eve represents both fiction and nonfiction works and is the founder of Grub Street, Inc., now recognized as the leading literary arts center in New England. Thanks for joining us today, Eve.
My pleasure.
Let's get started with our first question, and that is, let's just weigh in on how we feel or how you think that e-readers are affecting the experience of people reading today.
It means you can do it anywhere, anytime, and not run out. And for those of us who worry about running out, I'm reminded of Stephen King's comment that books are dope, stories are dope. A shocking thing to say, but for those of us who are traveling and really need to read, who really can't imagine being at loose ends for a few hours without having access to books, this is an extraordinary shift.
Yeah. And it's the availability of devices like that are clearly, the essential complement to the available of the digital resources themselves. As so much of the digital environment captures parts of the literary world, then it's even more valuable that there be devices available to use those resources wherever people are.
I agree. The only thing I would say is I think that the technology has not quite yet captured the experience of reading so that you can get entirely lost in a text. I think they're getting closer, but I look forward to the day where there's a device with pages that you can touch and feel.
Flip them like
And-
that.
Right,
yes.
so it really replicates that experience. I think it's still an interrupted experience,
Mhm.
although it's incredibly, I love it. I have a Kindle and I use it all the time, and I love being able to get a book in 30 seconds.
Isn't this one of the issues, though? I mean, there are software packages that will do some of those things that allow you to choose the colour of the background and so forth.
But you don't choose the color when you're reading. That's not, when you said the experience of reading, I wondered what is the experience of reading? What is core to the experience of reading? And for me, it's not about choosing the background, but about being lost in the book, as you said. If I'm trying to choose the background, I'm not lost.
But it might contribute to your getting lost.
I love the Kindle. It did let me get lost, and I thought I loved the experience. I got used to pushing the button. You can make a little tent of it if you're in bed and curled up and fall asleep over it. It's, as I said, it's fine for insomniacs. I could do everything.
Be better if it was backlit for insomniacs.
All right, it's true, but I turn the light on and it works, and it is even better than a paperback at keeping your place.
Right.
And so for me, it's the tradition. I'm traditional, I guess. It's the approximation to the traditional reading experience that I valued about the Kindle.
So we probably don't all feel as excited about the development we were reading about in the Times this morning, about books that incorporate video as an integral part of the reading experience.
I think they're very exciting for some books, but I would say getting lost in a Jane Austen novel wouldn't be one of them. But I think for a lot of self-help titles, for example, having the dimension of being able to see an exercise pose, for example, is really a huge new world. I think it's going to be exciting to see what books
It's like a
look
convergence
like.
between what a web browser can offer in terms of how to run a recipe or something like that.
Right,
and
exactly.
something you can carry around
And then
with
you can actually see the technique that the cook is using.
Or I think of reading, there are books that I read 10 years ago, and I felt the absence of a video right then, before this technology was available. John McPhee's wonderful books about geology and the shaping of the earth. I thought, this is wonderful, and I wish I could visualize it better. And a video would be a wonderful thing there, or in a geology textbook, and yet John McPhee did things to supply the absence of video. I remember an incredible, he would do metaphors, and I remember an incredible metaphor he wrote when he was talking about the Mississippi River and its damming ahead of Katrina. He said that the Mississippi River was beginning to stand up on the landscape like the veins on the back of a hand. And that metaphor was the visualization. It stood for the video. And if we have the video, will writers make metaphors of that vividness anymore? Or will it just click to the video? No more metaphor.
So you're suggesting that there can actually be a destimulating effect on creative imagination when people have tools of that sort.
I may be suggesting that. I may be suggesting that. That people will do with images what they once would have tried longer or harder or more inventively to do with words only. And then where are we?
Well, so maybe.
But I love my Kindle.
And maybe we should put this in the context of 15 to 17-year-olds who read on average less than 50 minutes a week, according to the National Endowments for the Arts 2007 report, and who are obsessively engaged with their handheld devices for a whole range of other purposes. Sure. There surely is an opportunity, and libraries, I'm convinced, are happy to make the most of that opportunity to bring reading to people committed to those devices, which they wouldn't be picking up using traditional print media.
So it sounds like you all use a Kindle or an e-reader of some kind, and you enjoy them, it sounds like. But do you feel there's something lost, and especially with the younger generation, if they are going to be more prone to using the e-readers of some type, do you feel like there's something, the nostalgia is lost of having that leather-bound glue smell come off the paper and reading that way?
I do, but I'm a middle-aged woman. I think if you don't grow up with it, I don't know, they might have a different kind of nostalgia altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is really exciting that digital life may really breathe a whole fresh, I mean, it's exciting in its ability to get younger people engaged in reading. I find that very exciting. I also do think, though, that it will change the novel.
Mm-hmm.
I think already it's much faster paced, and I see that when I submit novels. I know that all the editors are reading them digitally now, and I know that when you're reading, you have less. When you're reading that way, I think in general, at least people my age and older, you have less, and people will admit that they have ADHD when they're reading on screen, so it puts a burden on the text to move at a faster clip, and I know that's a trend that's been happening. I think the digital life is going to speed it up greatly.
Yeah, more to that point, do you think that e-readers will actually get more people to read, younger people to read more, or read differently? I mean, what impact do you think that could have on reading?
Does it just feed the already addicted?
Exactly, yeah.
It's only a couple of days since Disney announced that they were creating their new online subscription library of hundreds of Disney books, which are presumably going to be the choice, the selection of choice for some parents and families in interacting with their children for traditional reading that once upon a time would have been part of the snuggly bedtime experience.
Well, I think there are distinctions to be drawn between ways of reading in electronic media where outside distractions, and I've already prejudiced the issue by calling them distractions, obviously, rather than valuable links and information, those distractions. There are media experiences that bring in those distractions, and there are ways of reading that do not. And I've already said that I valued the Kindle. The pleasant surprise was that it allowed me to get lost in the book. But I do worry about the multitasking and the outwardness. If you're constantly linking out to something, are you going to get through the plot? It almost seems to me that there are two contrary human desires at war here, and one is for the kind of dope that consists of reading a story from beginning to end and driving through it. And then the other is the human urge for variety and constantly new stimulation. And we have reading modes that are warring between meeting both of those.
And yes, interestingly, Robert Darnton, the librarian at Harvard, recently wrote a splendid book where he makes an interesting comparison with reading habits in the 16th and 17th century, which mirrored some of those same Grasshopper type approaches to literature where you never read sequentially and
reading habits in the 1830s and 1840s United States, when the literary culture of reprinting and the relative lack of enforcement of copyright made it something like the world today. Everyone wanted to be a reader, everyone wanted to be a writer. Snippets of works got picked up and put into newspapers without respect of copyright. Bits of novels got stapled together and circulated, barely counting as books. Serial publication, of course. It's not as if there are no equivalents in the past to the kind of dispersed readings that people are doing today. So we can't say, oh, once upon a time we knew how to read and now we've forgotten. We may be rediscovering things that people did before in historical episodes of ferment and creativity.
There's another point we might want to make about the attractions of handheld devices. They're only as good in this sense as the database of material that they can access. That's true, isn't it?
And as long as the electricity is on. This is not a joke. I worry
Books
about
are not
the loss.
Technology dependent.
I worry about the loss of history. And students, I think, are curious. When I've lent books to students, a book here that has a 4-leaf clover pressed into it that a graduate student found, they pick up history and discover it in a way that they can't, even if the electricity is on in the Kindle, and if the electricity goes off.
But the counterpoint to that is that when everything's digitized, everybody can access it everywhere. It's much more democratic. So we're a lucky bunch of people that get to sit in this beautiful library. But think about a small child in a village in an underdeveloped country that will have access to all of this.
Oh, it makes an enormous difference even for my graduate students right here at Northeastern, because we were founded in 1898 rather than 1698, and our library isn't rich in pre-20th century materials, and just being able to access those materials without having to pay a user's fee, without having to have a special letter, just being able to do it right there is enormously helpful for us.
And if we look forward to what are the most significant events forming the future of libraries, you have to say at the present time that nothing is likely to be more impactful than the whole project that Google has undertaken in the Google Book Search project. 7 million texts that they've digitized, not all of them equally available, some of them out of copyright and therefore fully available through Google, and others more limited. But a corpus that size represents, you know, a tectonic shift, you might say, in the availability of digital resources in a way that, coupled with handheld devices, really just does change the landscape very significantly for us.
I think it would be possible even to base new modes of scholarship on the Google Book Project, because they have a feature, Google Bookshelf, where you can see what another scholar is reading, and I could comment on those books right there, so it can be, it's almost becoming a form of archiving or an exhibition or a kind of publication. But that leads me, well, I have questions about what happens to publishers and their work under this model, but I also wonder sometimes, Will, I have to say I'm skipping over the library. When I go to Google Books, I'm skipping the library.
Well, you may be, and you may be, and that depends on your image of what the library should be doing. And the library as a warehouse is only one part that it has ever fulfilled, one role that it's. The library as a centre of learning has a great future in the Google environment, because along with those Google materials and the mass of other digital material and data that are pouring out of the different sources of such thing, there's an even greater need to integrate it and organize it and help people manipulate it and understand it and discern and sieve the good from the bad. And those are the roles that libraries in the next few years, I think, will be adopting as even more central to their services and their activity.
So more to that then, with libraries, I mean, are we going to, you know, we have nearly 1 million volumes here at Snell, and are we going to come in here and there won't be books on the shelves?
It's a good question. I mean, we think of the library as containing 1 million volumes, but we know that everybody within the library has access to a vast array of material beyond that million. So we've stopped thinking of our collections as narrowly confined to the print material here. The way we extend the print collections is by digitizing them, and we're part of a number of projects that are working to digitize both the unique items we have in our collection and with other libraries in the Boston Library Consortium and elsewhere to contribute to the databases of such materials that anybody can access worldwide. So essentially the walls of the library start to dissolve in those circumstances, and we become just part of a larger, the universal library that Brewster Kahle, who founded the Internet Archive, talked about as his ambition, which was to essentially digitize over the next 10 years the total output of mankind's intellectual endeavor by the combination of these digitization projects in which we're part. So that's a really good feeling for us to be actually actively participating in a grand endeavor of that sort.
But it wouldn't be where you'd stop purchasing books for the, or would it? We get to that point?
We currently spend about 80% of our budget on digital resources. So we've already hugely reduced the amount that we spend on books. And I think we'll probably, you know, that's a trend that you can recognize in research libraries in particular, but all libraries up and down the country, that there's a shift away from the printed format to those other digital formats. That's going to continue, I'm sure. But I think we should remember that it may not happen any day soon that the volume of printed material is going to reduce. Far more books are bought nationally in brick and mortar bookstores than are ever sold on Amazon. I mean, by orders of magnitude. Yes. So there's still a very large print book market, commercial market, you know, in operation. And although we've seen the example of, you know, what happened to audio CD sales and so forth, I think it's going to be a while before sales of print books in particular, you know, diminish to the point where they represent, you know, only 20% of the national spending on information.
From your lips to God's ears. I hope you're right.
Are you worried about authors in this new world?
Actually, I'm less worried about authors than publishers, because I think that, well, look, nobody knows the future, but I think that as we shift to a fully digital world, what matters more, if you take away sort of the production of the book and the distribution of the production of the book, what are publishers doing? They're editing and they're marketing. Most authors I know are pretty upset with their publishers on both those fronts. So it's an industry that is going to be massively changing over the course of, it might take 20 years, I don't know. But I think actually it's a really exciting time to be a writer, because I think that in the future writers will be able to hold on to more than 15% of their books. They give up an awful lot right now to publishing houses. And as it's easier for them to go directly to places like Amazon, they're going to be able to maintain a bigger ownership in their books. So I think that's very exciting. It's also incredibly daunting, and there will always be tastemakers, whether they're going to be editors at Random House, book reviewers at the New York Times, somebody who's in control of a blog, Amazon people.
Well,
I'm not sure.
Will say that he wants the library to be a tastemaker. No, seriously, that he thinks the library's role, among other things, is helping people sift through materials. And I noticed, some of my faculty and I noticed that you put in the new catalog system a rating system. You've got stars, so that now users of the library in checking out books or coming through the card catalog can behave like readers in Amazon and rate books. I have misgivings about that,
Yes,
not
I
least
can
because
imagine.
I suppose I have a few copies of my books in the library here that are still waiting for their first stars. Who knows, but also...
We'll sort that out afterwards.
But who's the tastemaker there? The reader is the tastemaker.
Well, exactly, and so this is a process of what I learned to call technically disintermediation.
Right.
Is that right? Yes, so we're taking out the middle persons, the publisher's middle person agents.
Right.
Are you worried? Okay, agents too. I've been an editor in my time, taking out the middle persons, but libraries? You're middle persons too.
Right, but there's also another interesting, ironic angle to this, which is increasingly libraries are orienting their purchasing and acquisition of information to really be deeply responsive to users' demand.
Yes.
So, for instance, the one of the coming things that libraries will certainly be wanting to take on board is print on demand, where people not only get electronic access to materials they're interested in, but want to see a print copy as well, to annotate or to carry away. And there are a whole host of interesting technological developments in that area that we're keen to look at. It's, it varies across the different genre and it varies across the different libraries. I'm reminding of William Gibson, who said something like, "The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed."
I love that. Well, I think there's a role. I mean, look, if in the end the reader is, as you say, more powerful, and that means tastemakers are less powerful, but there is always going to be a role for people who are editing, people who are marketing, and doing PR for authors, because they can't do it alone, but they'll be able to have more power in hiring those and deciding what those things cost, as opposed to having their work licensed by a huge corporation that gets to do all that work and own the majority of the book. I mean, I don't know what the future will look like, but I do...
huge payoffs for very few,
exactly,
and microscopic payoffs for everyone else.
Everybody else. I mean, mostly books, the sad truth is, they do a pretty poor job of tastemaking, because most books do not earn out. The vast majority do not earn out. So they're overpaying. In a way, it's going to help publishers as they're leaner and trimmer in the future. They'll probably spend less money up front, and the marketplace will be able, authors that are successful in the marketplace will be rewarded. They'll earn more from their books. They'll own it. They'll have a bigger stake of ownership. There'll be less risk to the publisher. Right now, they have a huge risk when they buy a book.
And there's one other way in which the technology starts to help them, the so-called long tail. All those materials previously hidden when they'd gone out of print or weren't readily available or being advertised now sit available on Google and other such databases of information, and can be found and sought and requested and printed and read in a way that was really quite problematic.
Does it return anything to the author or the publisher when that happens?
Well, to the extent that a book that has been out of print can get some prominence and return to print, it may well benefit a copyright holding author.
That's true. The downside, I think, for the person, a lot of my clients are getting their first book out. It's daunting to compete against everyone who's ever written a book. I mean, the backlist now stretches back to way far back. So it's tough. It's tougher to find that book that's really gonna deliver something on the nonfiction side. Let's say you're a parenting expert that hasn't already been covered. It's harder. I think you're competing with not only the 200,000 books that come out every year, but everything that anyone's written previously.
So you actually think the technology is making the quality of writing have to be better? Even though the access...
That's a tough question.
Right. I mean, how do you feel like technology would impact the quality of what authors are producing?
Well, I think that there's a place where you could make the argument that because everything's a bit broken down right now and publishers are less secure about what will make a book work, they often will go for the celebrity-backed book or for a book where there's already the person has a huge platform or reach. So it's almost as if in some kinds of books the personality of the author is more important than the content. So in that way I don't think we're getting better content per se in the book. But if you're trying to put a book out there that is prescriptive and it's in an area like parenting or medicine, I think it does demand, there is a higher standard because it is competing with many fine books that have already been done. You better have something new and interesting to say. Otherwise it's going to be tougher.
And with free sources of information as well.
Right, exactly. That changes it too. You can't have a wholly prescriptive book anymore because you can get all of that stuff online. Although it's interesting, some things like there are plenty of examples where a blog has almost been published word for word and sold quite well.
I tried to read one of those. It was terrible. No, I wonder about the standard of editing because you've described, in a way, from the happy author's perspective, the disappearance of editing, but having sometimes a book is painful to read if it has not been well edited, and I hope that there will be a demand on readers' parts for beautifully produced, crisply edited, for the value added by that sort of editing.
And one other point to add, which I would be failing if I didn't bring to attention, and that's the whole issue about the long-term preservation of these books. Once rendered digitally and historically, books of this books would be the responsibility of libraries to maintain, and the printed book has all sorts of wonderful attractions to it in terms of its permanence and longevity. The issue about who's going to take responsibility for the long-term storage of born digital books of the sort we're discussing here and of the sort that Kindles and other devices rely on for their efficacy is a real issue. That libraries in the next 10 years, both nationally and internationally, are looking at some large-scale solutions to some of those issues about the long-term preservation of the digital corpus.
But the non-digital corpus also had a life and an afterlife in a less institutionalized way. I pick up books from book barns all the time or online, so it's individuals as well as big institutions that have preserved these things. And along with their preservation, they've incorporated the traces of their own reading, the inscriptions, the four-leaf clover in the pages, and so forth, and they pass that on as a history. And a nice digital archive will not bear those fingerprints. So if I'm asking 200 years from now how it is that people read fiction, how it is that people interacted, the sorts of clues that I have now will be absent.
Or won't they? Could there be a Wikipedia-like component to a worldwide digital storage unit?
If you're downloading a PDF and adding your own annotations,
as I am from time to time now,
then all it requires the mere requirement is for that PDF to be preserved for posterity, and all your comments will be available for anybody to read.
But that's not a mere requirement, you see, because my computer will be junk in about 2 years' time,
Indeed,
and
right.
someone will, if I'm lucky, if we're being ecologically responsible, someone will recycle the hard drive, and it will just be over, and no one will ever pick up my copy of Amy Lowell's poems and see my marginalia in them.
Oh, we're starting to have a sense of nostalgia for your PDF now. I'm not
Something like that. I am worried about the loss of the sense that a book is passed on, that it goes through many hands, that it isn't. It's partly that it's been through many hands that makes it valuable to me, and I don't care if I can change the color of the background in it. I'd rather see the traces of other people's reading. It makes it more alive to me.
And just to mention, there is a very interesting phenomenon, which is when large libraries with valuable and famous books in them digitize those books. The classic example is the British Library when it first digitized its Beowulf manuscript. The interest in the original physical artifact goes through the roof. So the stimulus for
that's
people
happened in
to
Emily Dickinson's scholarship as well, that people want to look at that.
And that's actually happening with people will often buy a digital version of a book, and if they love the book, and this is where quality comes in and fine editing comes in, they will purchase it as well.
Yeah.
So it might be that books don't disappear. Maybe just the best books will have a physical form. And the ones that are less valuable to users over time will disappear. I don't know.
Great. Well, I think we're going to leave it there, but a great discussion about, I think, the pros and the cons and some of the issues revolving around e-readers and digital devices with reading. So I just want to thank you so much for coming in and having this discussion with us. Thank you so much for joining us today, and happy reading.